Nate wanted to make some more of these videos. I said, no one will watch them. We can't possibly do it. And Nate said, listen, we're going to be winning so much, you're going to get tired of winning. You're going to say, stop, no more winning. We can't win anymore. We can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I know how much you hate Dark Souls, so I'm really happy that you finally suffered through talking about this game.
Yeah, I very clearly hate Dark Souls.
Thank you.
I love these games. And today I wanted to take a look at 5 of our favorite bosses from the very first game that kind of started the Dark Souls franchise, and talk about why we like them so much. Now, these might not all be the most mechanically in-depth bosses. We will talk about the mechanics as well. These are just boss fights that stuck with us, that we really enjoyed, and still think about to this day. So if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. We appreciate you very much, but let's hop right into it. Number 5. So the first boss is one that I guess some people would say is pretty neato, and that's Neato. Now, this is a boss found at the tail end of going through the catacombs and the Tomb of the Giants, and honestly going through quite a bit of frustrating gameplay your first time through the game. But the boss itself, I think, is well worth it, because the game starts where you're actually seeing the lords. You're seeing them get their lord souls and establish themselves. You see a little bit of the fight against the dragons early on. And one of the characters you see is Neato, who they say used essentially pestilence and death to fight against the dragons. And then you finally get down into this crypt. And who do you fight? The guy from the intro cutscene, Neato. I thought this was really interesting.
Yeah, you almost forgot about him by this point, by the time you get down there. But this was a boss fight that I have a lot of mixed feelings on, because the boss himself is awesome. But getting to him, like you said, is literally one of my least favorite sections in the game. Like in the catacombs, and then you fight Pinwheel, who is laughably easy. And then you also go into that room after Pinwheel, where you have all like these rolling skeleton guys attacking you. And then the Tomb of the Giants sucks. And then you finally get to Neato, and it's amazing.
And you have to fight a bunch of weird aborted skeleton babies, and then you fight a bunch of pinwheels.
Right.
Remember how there's a bunch of reused pinwheels
I
in the
remember
room
that.
before him? Which I don't really understand the significance of. There might be some big lore significance to all these pinwheels
I have no
being
idea.
here. I don't actually know. I really enjoy this fight because, first off, he has some rare moves. So one move that he doesn't do that often is the grab. Now, I suck, so I did get grabbed. I lived, but I thought it was kind of interesting to see some of these moves that he doesn't use that often. He also does use moves that you are able to get as well. I will say, this fight, I wish it was a little more reliant on Neato himself, because I don't think this fight would be difficult at all in any regard if there weren't skeletons getting up over and over again to bother you.
Yeah.
And that kind of drags the fight down a little bit. Don't you think? Because I feel like it's reliant on annoying mobs. They pretty much... Neato's the Lord of the Dead. Mm-hmm. So he's able to revive the dead, obviously. He's able to kind of manipulate death and control these skeletons, these dead bodies. But I do think the boss fight relies a little bit on these annoying skeletons aggroing on you and following you around the arena. Makes sense, but I think that the focus should have been on Neato himself, because he has an amazing design. He has a cloak of dead bodies in this almost transparent soul-looking material. He's very imposing, but he's so slow.
Yeah, that was the only downside for this fight. I also hated the skeletons. They make sense, and to be honest, I like them. Like, I like the lore reason behind it. It's cool. Like, you can summon these skeletons and then revive them. That's an interesting concept. It wasn't really hard. It was just annoying.
Yeah, because you keep trying to back up, and then you just bump into skeletons.
Right. And that's something I've never really liked in Souls bosses in general, is I don't mind them being hard. Hard is fine.
Yeah, you're hard.
I'm hard. You know,
you're hard right now.
Yeah. But annoying is a different thing.
Right, we're that too, though.
Well, yeah, exactly. Neato's an interesting boss. I like his design, I like his moveset, I like him in general. I also find the skeletons annoying, but cool. One thing I really like about Neato, though, is it's not very often that you actually get to fight bosses in these games specifically that are actually in opening cutscenes. Mm-hmm. You know, Elden Ring does a good job with it, where it does show some of the bosses that you find, and then you do meet some of them or the characters.
Well, a lot of times it's more of these larger than life characters that you don't really get to see, like the
almost
furtive,
like godlike creatures.
Well, remember the furtive pygmy even from this one, the guy who finds the dark soul in general.
Yeah,
and then it's open to interpretation if that is Manus or not. One of the coolest things about Neato is not even in the boss. It's that you can meet him outside of the boss to enter his covenant. You basically have to go into that one coffin, you lay down and you shut the lid and you wait, and then eventually you wake up in his boss arena, but he's non-hostile and you're able to essentially enter a covenant with him.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool
awesome.
too, because you're able to go into a different version of his boss area that's non-hostile and take a look at the boss's design, enter the covenant, then go off and do whatever you want to level up that covenant for a trophy or weapons or things if you want. But I thought that was cool because I think that's the only boss on this list that has that kind of interaction with it. Number 4. It's the 4th one.
4.
So the next one is Seath the Scaleless. This is an interesting boss fight because you have to die the first time you encounter him.
Yeah, which I didn't really know at first, because when I first battled him, I went in there and I fought, and I remember kind of freaking out. First of all, this was my first Souls game I played, so I was like scared to death at every boss fight. When I was battling him and I wasn't doing damage, I was getting like very fearful. I was like, oh no, because I had like a bunch of souls with me, and I don't know why I had souls with me going into a boss
and
fight.
You didn't know,
and
I would assume you didn't know the Ring of Sacrifice.
I didn't know that. No, I didn't, and I was getting nervous and scared, and then I get killed. I'm sitting there like,
yeah.
And then you wake up in the prison afterwards, and I'm kind of like, what?
Yeah,
like,
how did I end
that?
up here?
Yeah, it's a very interesting boss fight, and then you do have to eventually go through a whole maze or whatever, a whole path until you get to his invincibility crystal. Yeah. Which I thought was just a very interesting feature of him.
Well, this all tied in really well into his lore that he was a dragon who it was kind of said was ostracized from the other dragons. Being the Scaleless was not a good thing.
Yeah.
So they actually go into this in some of the lore and item descriptions and things as well, and channels that can cover this a lot more deeply than we can on YouTube too. But something I thought was really interesting is in the opening cutscene, they talk about how Gwyn would use his lightning to peel off the scales of the dragons. It would hit them and kind of de-armor them. And then the other lords essentially would be able to kill the dragons that way. So, for example, you would have Neato unleashing death and pestilence, or you'd have the witches of Izalith using fire and their powers. And that was kind of how they beat them, along with Seath helping to turn on the dragons. He betrayed them.
Yeah.
And he is this very interesting character who performs all of these really messed up scientific and magical experiments on people and different things to try and create creatures, to try and change things. And he's vastly altered himself by the time of Dark Souls. I mean, he's a very odd dragon. He has multiple wings now. And I think that it's really interesting how they, one, designed this boss, but two, how those design elements play into his boss fight with destroying his invulnerability crystal so that he can be hurt, and outsmarting him in that way, and essentially having to then fight him where he still has these crystalline powers that he can shoot at you. All of that lore stuff ties very well into his boss fight.
Yeah, and that's something I found really interesting, because I like going up to it, you're fighting all these weird creatures, and you're kind of like, well, who are these creatures? Like, these are very odd looking, but it's actually his creations. One thing I liked about Seath, though, is his design.
Oh, he's so cool.
He looks awesome. He's like this really cool crystallized white dragon that's just really amazing looking.
There was not a more unique dragon in this franchise, in my opinion, until Placidusax.
Yes, I was just going to say, that's probably the best dragon in the franchise.
When we got to Elden Ring with Placidusax.
That was awesome.
That was amazing. But before that, I think
Seath was the cool. Yeah, for sure. One boss fight that I found very comparable to the Seath one, with one mechanic, was in Demon Souls, where you have the Fool's Idol. How you have to go and kill like that magician guy that's protecting her. It was kind of the same thing with the invincibility crystal.
Yes.
That I found an interesting mechanic.
Well, in the words of George Lucas, it rhymes. It's interesting how they actually take things from previous games and they expand on those ideas.
Yeah, right.
You know, in previous games, for Fool's Idol, the annoying thing is that that invulnerability buff is not in the boss arena.
No.
You can miss it.
Right.
And then you end up in the boss arena and you can't get out.
Yes.
But with this, they kind of learned from that, and it's, okay, well, now we're going to put this thing in the boss arena.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they were taking the ideas of Demon Souls with this and building on them in a very cool way. Number three. So next up we have Gwyn. Gwyn is one of my favorite bosses in the entire Soulsborne franchise. He's built up to so well, and they're always talking about Gwyn. They're referring to Gwyn. What happened to Gwyn? Where did he go? Well, he left in order to preserve the Age of Fire. Well,
where did he come from?
Where did he go? Where did he come from?
Cotton Eye Joe.
Yeah, that's the question. And finally you get down into the kiln, and you walk in, and here comes Gwyn. But there's something wrong with him. He's gone hollow. So basically the quintessential Jesus-like figure of this universe, you know, who everybody worships, and they're like, oh, the Lord Gwyn, he's amazing, he's wonderful, he was so benevolent, such a great guy. You come across him and he's turned into basically what you've been fighting the whole game, and kind of what you are too, because you are an undead. You can go between more hollow and human with humanity, but you find out this really tragic story of what happened to him, that he marched his troops into the kiln and burned all of them and himself and his Lord Soul in order to preserve the Age of Fire.
Well, the Gwyn fight, I find the second hardest boss fight in the entire game, which is very fitting because he is the final boss.
I suck at it.
But the hardest one for me is still Ornstein Smough, and I will stand by that. That's like one of the hardest boss fights in Souls in general.
I remember when you said that one was not very fun for you, and people tried to say you were not a real fan of Souls or something like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they did. But the Gwyn also was very hard. This was a very tough boss fight. But the thing is, it didn't feel unfair. Mm-hmm. That's the difference between me with Ornstein Smough and Gwyn. Ornstein Smough is unfair. Gwyn is just hard.
Uh-oh.
I'm hard.
We've opened... No, I know. We've opened the door to the... Well, actually, Ornstein Smough isn't unfair because of blah, 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 blah.
It is unfair.
Well, I think for your first time playing through it, certainly
yes,
is.
Absolutely.
I think that that fight seems very designed around Solaire's comments of jolly cooperation.
Right.
Which I think is fitting that he's there and you can bring him into that boss
right.
fight. One thing that's cool is the Gwyn boss fight actually has several little secrets and missable things. First off is a lot of that lore that we talked about, missable.
Yeah.
You can get here and not really have much of an idea of who Gwyn is. Mm-hmm. If you're paying attention, you're finding stuff, this boss fight means a lot more to you. Secondly, and something really neat, and maybe we'll talk about it in a secrets video in the future, but you can save Solaire and get him to make it to this boss with you. And then you could summon him to fight the boss with Solaire. I thought that was really neat.
That's awesome, yeah.
That there are ways to get Solaire to this point of the game, even though he normally wouldn't be under your first time playing at the very least.
Right.
I like that there's also hidden mechanics in this fight too. You can parry Gwyn, because even though he is big, he's still essentially in the form of a man. He's parryable.
Yeah, another thing I really like about Gwyn was the lead up to him. Like the end world area that you're at, and you walk to Gwyn's fighting arena. I thought that place was also very interesting.
Do you remember when you see the souls of the warriors that were burned walk by?
Yeah, that was cool.
That was amazing.
So, yeah.
And he also has amazing armor you can unlock, remember?
Yes.
You can buy his armor later on from a vendor after you beat him in New Game Plus.
Yep, I remember that.
So, really cool boss. Love him. One of the most iconic characters in the entire franchise. And he still has lore implications and matters going forward. Dark Souls 2, a little bit about him. Dark Souls 3, there's some stuff with his descendants, actually. So, really cool stuff that he carries over throughout the entire franchise. Number two, the numero dos.
The next one on our list might be my favorite boss in this game. It's also the most depressing boss fight in almost any video game I've ever played. Mm-hmm. So there is that to take with it, but it is Sif. Sif is a wolf, but he's also Artorius' pet wolf. And when you come across him, you see him, he's climbing over this thing to meet you, and he grabs his sword and attacks you, and you're thinking like, oh, this is interesting. And then you find out his story, and it instantly becomes, oh, well, I feel bad about killing this guy now.
Sif was the good guy.
Well, exactly. He was actually a good
guy.
It is just overall a very depressing boss fight. And the worst part about it is he can actually limp.
Mm-hmm.
And you just feel bad. Like, I feel like I'm beating up a dog.
Well, you are.
Which you are, because wolves are dogs. But it's just... It's sad.
As you
but
hurt
it's
him,
so cool.
He moves more injured.
Yes.
And, you know, I don't know if you remember this too, but you can actually meet Sif in the Artorius of the Abyss DLC.
Yes,
where you see
that.
some of what happened. And Artorius actually shielded Sif.
Mm-hmm.
He prevented Sif from being taken over by the Abyss.
Yeah.
And protected him and gave him his, you know, shield, essentially. And that's why Artorius is more quickly corrupted, because he was trying to protect his friend.
Right.
And also he is injured as well, Artorius. It's also interesting too, because Sif, this is a little secret here too, he has a secret interaction with the player.
Mm-hmm.
If you beat the Artorius of the Abyss DLC first and then fight him. So New Game Plus, let's say you go to Ulasil, you do all that, then you go fight Sif, he will actually smell Artorius on you.
I did not know that.
And he will cry.
Yeah, this boss fight is super depressing, but it's actually just a really good boss fight. I mean, all that stuff aside, the mechanics of it is very fun and interesting. He's very quick. Mm-hmm. He's very fast with his sword, but he's not too hard.
I like that he holds it in his mouth.
I like that too, yeah. I like that too. Overall, really good boss fight.
Yeah.
I love Sif a lot. He was one of the most memorable bosses in all of Souls games for me.
Number 1! Splat.
Artorius. Artorius ties a lot into the story we talked about before. We could get into it again, but there's a lot of lore around him. He has one of the coolest designs in this entire franchise. You can get his armor later on from an NPC vendor. It's one of my favorite sets in the game.
It's the one I played when I fought Gwyn.
Oh, it's so cool.
I wore it when I fought Gwyn. It was awesome.
I love it. And he is a very fun, difficult, but fair boss fight, I believe. He does a lot of interesting mechanics. He will actually buff himself during the fight. You can interrupt it if you hit him either hard enough or frequently enough while he's doing it. Basically, you output enough damage on him while he's trying to buff himself. You can stop it. Interestingly, you are fighting an underpowered version of Artorius. You are fighting a version of Artorius where his arm is broken, and he can still kick your ass. I mean, this is a very interesting character. He was one of the Knights of Gwyn, so he's one of the most elite warriors in Lordran, I would say, to pretty much ever exist.
Mm-hmm.
He's just very, very cool, and I think a very well-detailed boss that ties in so well to the storyline of the base game, but also to the storyline and world of Ulasil in the DLC.
Yeah, one thing I found very disappointing, I should say, about Artorius is there's probably a lot of, or I should say a fair number of people that haven't battled him, because he is a DLC character.
And that DLC is very missable.
It is, and, well, it very much is missable.
It's very kind of like tucked off in the corner.
Yeah, you could have the PS4 version of this game with the DLC on it, and you still miss it. I literally almost did when I played through this game, and you had to tell me, yeah, go over here and find it. Otherwise, I just would have not have. Why would I ever check back in like the random corner of like this weird area?
I think From Software,
would I do that?
I think they knew that was a bit of an issue with how well they hit the Artorius DLC.
Yeah.
Because then in Dark Souls 2, which you played through as well,
yes,
they make the DLCs a lot easier to find, where there's essentially these shrines that you're gonna pass by anyway.
Right.
And then you can go back to go into the different kingdoms. So they made that much more easily accessible in that game. But in this one, it was just kind of hidden off in the corner.
Yeah. You have to like know where it is.
Pretty much, yeah.
Or
luck into it.
Or just luck into it, yeah. But for the people that did fight him, they really got a treat of a boss, because this boss is really fun. He is very challenging. Like, I think I died to him maybe like 5 or 6 times. Like, he's very hard. But it's fun. It's a fun hard. Kind of like me, I'm a fun hard.
Absolutely.
But this one is very interesting. His costume, though, is my favorite part about him. I can't say enough about his costume. I love it. It's my favorite outfit in that game.
I think he has one of the best visual designs in the Soulsborne franchise, but especially in this game, his armor set is very unique. His storyline is very unique. It's very sad Artorius was one of the good guys.
Mm-hmm.
So was Sif. And I would argue you still fight Sif when he is one of the good guys. Sif is trying to prevent people from going to where Artorius was. He's trying to prevent people from going down into the abyss and dying and becoming corrupted. He's trying to help you, and you kill him during that.
Right.
And Artorius essentially passed his goodness on to Sif in a way, because by the time you fight him, he's very corrupted. But I thought that it was a very tragic, but well thought out, well established, and well executed boss fight. Something I really like is that you can actually talk to an NPC after his boss fight that then ties into it as well, where they want Artorius' soul to essentially lay him to rest.
Mm-hmm.
You can choose to do so or not. But I did think that it's interesting that even his boss fight has a follow-up. And there's a lot of storyline given to you from the Marvelous Chester as well, around the boss fight when you meet that NPC. So there's a lot of, I guess, pieces that come together to make the Artorius boss fight better than just the encounter it is on screen.
Right.
So these are our 5 favorite bosses in Dark Souls 1. I'm sure there are some bosses that are more mechanically deep, like, well, actually on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, Pinwheel can do this move that is super special and equals 666. I don't know, but these are our favorites, okay? So we enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. We appreciate you very much. Big thank you to some of our patrons and members. I want to put a thank you here to you. Thank you for helping support this channel. We appreciate you. And we do actually play through games, podcast style, over on our other channel, Degenerate Plays. The link is in the description down below. We actually played through Demon's Souls Remake over there. So we'd love it if you'd join us over there. And have a fantastic day. As always, everyone, stay shway.